Welcome back.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Boslin and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee for the opportunity to testify today. Again, my name is Hope Ledford, HOPELEDFORD, and I'm here on behalf of Chamber Progress. We are a tech industry coalition promoting technology's progressive future. Our partners include innovators like Google and Apple, but they do not have a vote or veto over our policy positions. I want to start out by emphasizing that we share the goal of making the internet safer for young people. Protecting kids online is critical, but LB 383 takes the wrong approach, one that compromises privacy, harms vulnerable youth, and raises serious First Amendment concerns. First, while it is important to encourage parental involvement to ensure minor safety online, parents are not always the best suited to control how their child uses the platform. This bill empowers parents to arbitrarily revoke access to social media, which can be weaponized in custody disputes or abusive households. According to the CDC, over half of teens experience violence or psychological abuse at home. For many, social media is a vital source of support, connection, and even crisis intervention. Cutting off access could leave vulnerable youth more isolated and at risk. According to the American Psychological Association, online interactions can be particularly beneficial for youth, quote, particularly during periods of social isolation, when experiencing stress, when seeking connections to peers with similar development and/or health conditions, and perhaps especially for youth who experience adversity or isolation in offline environments, end quote. Second, LB 383 requires platforms to use age verification methods, including using third-party vendors applicable to all users, which is a tremendous encroachment of individual privacy and acts contrary to data minimization efforts. Adults who don't want to share sensitive information online may be forced to either hand over their data or stop using these services altogether. Worse, requiring platforms to store this information makes them prime targets for cyber attacks, putting millions at risk. This is not a theoretical threat. Recently, a company that offered verification services to online platforms was found to have left personal data unprotected, threatening the privacy of an untold number of users. Lastly, this bill raises serious First Amendment concerns. Recent rulings from courts in Arkansas, Utah, Mississippi, and Ohio underscore the principle that regulatory measures impacting the core editorial and curatorial functions of social media companies, even when intended to safeguard young users, are subject to rigorous constitutional scrutiny under the First Amendment. The courts have reaffirmed that access to lawful online content, regardless of age, is a protected right. We agree with the need to build greater protections for young users, but this bill's requirements would guarantee protracted litigation without advancing child safety. For these reasons, we respectfully urge you to oppose LB 383.
Questions from the committee, Senator DeBoer.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand your argument. I think I heard you say that that we don't want to have folks turn over sensitive data. Did you say that?
Yes.
What I see in the bill is a requirement that you have to show your age. Now, at this point in my life, that might be sensitive data to me, but I don't think we typically call that sensitive data. What are you referring to when you're saying sensitive data, since all we're asking for is perhaps a driver's license, and I don't think that that's particularly sensitive data.
For example, thank you for your question, Senator DeBoer. I think for the concern about requiring government-issued IDs is not everyone has a government-issue ID. So if a parent doesn't have a government-issue ID, then that prohibits them from being able to grant or to not grant access to social media for their child. Also,
Wait, let's take that. First, I would say I think that's a different argument than a sensitive data argument. And that is an interesting argument to me, because that would say there's a certain class of kids who wouldn't, and actually not just kids, but anyone who doesn't have a government-issued ID might have difficulty with access. But you heard the senator say there will be or could be alternative forms of age verification. And I will tell you, I do not imagine that anyone considers a video of their hand waving around to be sensitive data. So I think you have two issues here. One is not everyone will have access to social media because not everyone has a government ID. That's an intriguing argument to me. I'll think more about it. But now I want to know what sensitive data you think might be accidentally given to someone or accidentally on the internet because of this age verification requirement?
For sure. So as you were referring to, there are a lot of biometric ways that third parties have used to verify ages, and I know a lot of people would not, including adults, would not want their biometric data stored by a third-party vendor or by a platform. Additionally, I personally wouldn't want my driver's license has my address on it. I personally wouldn't want to hand over that information to a third-party vendor. So situations like that.
But wait, your address is everywhere, right? Like, people can get, like, there are other ways that people can get your address, right? Like, that's on the internet now. I mean, back when we used to have phone books and you could stay out of the phone book, maybe you could avoid having your address out there. I suppose maybe there are some celebrities who go to great lengths not to have their address out there. But your address is out there. That's not sensitive data. The biometrics that you're talking about, why don't we just pinky promise Senator Storer that we're not going to use sensitive biometrics when we do this? I mean, I don't see the argument of what sensitive data. I'm trying to help you here. What sensitive data are you thinking that we might wrongly pick to authorize by this statute a methodology for determining age that includes sensitive data?
Yes, thank you. I think someone earlier spoke about using how somehow age verification platforms and vendors use credit card information or credit cards to verify.
Okay.
So that's another example of some sensitive data that that adults would not like to offer up.
Thank you. That's a helpful piece of advice. Let's not do that, Senator Storer. Okay. So I get now your argument on that piece. And I'm not trying to be combative. Really, I'm not. So I get that piece. Okay, sensitive data. But I think we can probably handle that. So now, what are your other objections again?
Yes, we're especially worried about how it could risk cutting off access to social media for vulnerable youth, including multiple populations. And then we also have our First Amendment concerns as well.
Okay. So the vulnerable youth who don't have access now is probably something we'll have to think about and address. If there's not it's not just youth, right? Because everybody would have to put their ID in. So it could be vulnerable adults that don't have an ID or some other way of doing it. So we'll probably need to make sure that we have multiple options for age verification that do not just require the ownership of an ID. Okay. And then the First Amendment, I don't have enough brain space to get into that right now. So I appreciate your comments. Thanks for answering my questions.
Yes, thank you.
Senator Hallstrom.
Did I hear you correctly say that not all adults are appropriate to revoke access for minor children?
Yes, thank you so much for your question, Senator.
That wasn't a question. I just wanted to know that's all you have to answer for that. I'm going to go further. Excuse
Yes,
me.
sorry.
And so, but, I mean, I could probably agree that there are situations where some parents aren't best suited for any number of reasons, but would you agree that in the vast majority of cases, parents are appropriate to revoke access for their minors?
Thank you for your question, Senator. As I mentioned in my testimony, the CDC finds that over half of teens experience psychological abuse from their parent or guardian. I don't know the exact statistics on what youth experience at home, but I do know that there are a lot of youth who maybe live in an abusive household, or they might live in a home where their parent doesn't support their identity, and that could be used or weaponized against them and cut them off from life-saving resources that could help them escape that dangerous situation.
Okay, but in the vast majority of cases, I guess I'm not seeing the connection between unfortunate abusive situations and a parent's decision. You provide an example, but I would think in most of the cases, if they're being abused, it doesn't necessarily have an automatic connection to whether or not they get disconnected from access.
Thank you for that. I would like to point out there are a lot of resources online for young people to help them access mental health resources, especially for communities that find adversity in online or offline situations, to help them find health information and resources. And again, a lot of impactful connections made. So if a child were to be sadly facing abuse in home, maybe they have a mentor or someone they connected with on social media that can help them escape an abusive situation.
And I guess I would just say, I would be hard pressed to think that even under those circumstances, that the reason that the parents would cut off access is to prevent them from having access to those types of resources. There's many other reasons why parents, irrespective of what the family situation is, would have good reason to say there's other things that are happening in the access to social media that I don't want my children accessing. And you don't have to respond to that, but that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Senator Storm.
Thank you. So the Chamber of Progress is your organization?
Yes. Senator
Where are you
Rizzo.
based out of?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C., okay. So is Meta one of your corporate partners?
No.
Your website said it is.
Meta Europe, which is different from Meta
Meta
US.
Europe, okay, but Google, Apple,
Yes.
and so all those. So I'm just trying to figure out why these large corporations that are sending, part of these groups are sending people out to oppose legislation to help children with no, like Senator Boslin said, no guidance on how we can maybe try to help. So does your company have any guidance for states and people like Senator Storr to try to help children?
Yes, thank you for your question, Senator Storm. I would like to point out, as I did in my testimony, that Chamber Progress, our partner companies do not have any vote or veto on our positions, and there are times when we disagree with them, and they do not sit on our board, so I would like to point that out first. And then also, I would be happy to connect anyone with someone from my team that could better answer some questions and provide more clarity.
One more question. So corporate partners, does that mean they fund you? Is that where you get funded?
Yes.
from? So you're funded by them, okay. All right, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. One of your concerns was that this requires companies to gather data in violation of data minimization regulations, or something to that effect. I paraphrase, but is that... I gave an example, you weren't there either, but I gave an example on my bill 504 the other day, that if I said I was thinking about buying a cute shirt for my daughter for the 4th of July, that my Facebook newsfeed would populate 4th of July shirts for children, and I'm not kidding you. That night I had Facebook ads for 4th of July shirts. So you telling me that they are not already gathering all of this data and that somehow my date of birth is offensive is mind-blowing. I don't think anyone, including you, actually believes that these platforms are not gathering data to include, among a variety of other things, your date of birth. Tell me I'm wrong.
Thank you, Senator Boslin. I would like to point out that platforms would want to be sure, because of the private right of action and the litigation that would follow, they would want to be sure, absolutely sure, of a user's age in that sense. So they would use hard age verification methods, like I mentioned before, including biometric data, including personal identifying data. And so we are really strong proponents of supporting privacy efforts. However, we think this bill would lead to more privacy violations.
So you're telling me that these third-party organizations that are not controlled by you can't be trusted with my date of birth, but that your ability to gather all of that data is somehow different and less intrusive?
I'm not sure I'm following, sorry.
Well, the bill proposes that there isn't actually a prescribed method for age verification in this bill, unless I'm misreading it. She basically is saying the company can decide if there's a method that they prefer, that they think is less intrusive, go for it, right? And what you're telling me is that those third-party companies that you would contract with shouldn't be trusted because it's a violation of my privacy as a user, not yours. You don't, the companies don't have the right to the privacy, right? It's the consumer's right to privacy. But that I can't trust those third-party companies with my date of birth or some age verification information in order to use the platform, because that's they shouldn't be trusted. They could have a data breach.
Yes, that's correct.
And the information that we're providing to them would essentially be the same information that you're already gathering. The social media companies and internet providers are already gathering on us.
Like I mentioned before, platforms will be sure of, like, to have absolute certainty about someone's age. They will use harder age verification methods, and that again would lead to the methods that I mentioned earlier, and a lot of people would rather not have that data stored, whether by a platform or whether by a third-party vendor. And even if the third-party vendor was acting in good faith, it opens up, I guess, vulnerability for cyber attacks and that sort of thing.
Okay, and I appreciate your answer. I guess I just fundamentally disagree, and perhaps it's because Nebraskans are different, that people would feel more safe without an age verification than they would with having to provide their date of birth. And we can agree to disagree on that, and I understand your position, but I think kids are worth protecting more so than my date of birth. Any other questions?
One last
Senator
comment.
Storm.
Thank you. So, yeah, if someone can, your team can reach out to us with your guardrails that you'd like to put in place, that'd be great. What you think?
Yeah, we do, and I say this for myself too, and I'm a member of Gen Z. Like, I genuinely want to protect my peers and want to have a safe online environment for kids, and I speak on behalf of myself and on behalf of Chamber of Progress. We just believe that this bill would inadvertently have negative effects.